Welcome to Science Reshaped, where we wander through the quiet mysteries of the cosmos. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Because what you're about to hear may change the way you think about space itself. A few weeks ago, a strange event rippled across the instruments at NASA's Deep Space Network. It was faint, but unmistakable. A pattern hidden within the static, repeating just enough to suggest intention. At first it looked like a glitch, a miscalibrated feed, but then the same pattern appeared again, this time detected by two other stations thousands of miles apart. The signal came from a region of space everyone thought was empty, a point along the projected trajectory of 3I Atlas, the interstellar object that had already broken nearly every rule we thought physics obeyed. When 3I Atlas first entered the solar system, it was just another visitor from beyond, an interstellar fragment, a lonely traveler from another star. But what happened near its perihelion, the point where it passed closest to the sun, changed everything. It glowed blue. It accelerated in ways our equations couldn't explain. It left the sun's proximity not burned or shattered, but transformed. And now, months later, it had done something even stranger. It had spoken. No one at NASA wanted to use that word publicly, of course. Communication is dangerous territory for science, but in the corridors and late-night video calls, that's exactly what they called it. A message. Not words, not language, just a pulse, a rhythm buried in the noise. At first, the data analysts thought it was random. The universe is full of noise, pulsars, cosmic rays, and the hum of the sun itself. But the pattern from 3I Atlas wasn't random. It repeated in exact intervals of 33.2 seconds. The same rhythm the object emitted months ago when it brushed the edge of the sun and made it pulse in harmonic waves. It was as if 3I Atlas had remembered that rhythm and was now playing it again out in the dark. The frequency wasn't radio, at least not in the traditional sense. It came as faint modulations in the deep space background, detectable only when the solar wind was quiet. It was subtle, like someone whispering through layers of cosmic interference. But once the pattern was isolated, its precision was undeniable. NASA's Deep Space Communication Complex in Canberra, Australia, confirmed the anomaly first. Within hours, Madrid's facility caught the same signal. By morning, California's Goldstone station had the third confirmation. The triangulation was perfect. The signal was coming from the predicted position of 3I Atlas, now beyond the orbit of Jupiter, speeding away from the sun faster than any known object of its mass should. The discovery should have been exhilarating. Instead, it felt ominous, because for all their excitement, no one could explain how the signal was being sent. 3I Atlas had no visible emissions, no radio burst, no thermal output. It was silent, yet the pattern persisted, as if the silence itself carried structure. NASA's internal documents described it in the most careful language possible, a repeating periodic anomaly of non-natural statistical probability. But behind those words, the unease was clear. Nature doesn't send rhythms like this, not across billions of kilometers, not with this kind of consistency. And then came something even stranger. The signal changed. For 6 hours, the pattern shifted subtly. The 33-second rhythm began to shorten. 32.8 seconds, 32.5, 31.9, until it stabilized at exactly 31.5 seconds. That shouldn't have happened. No cosmic process drifts like that and then locks into a new precise value. It was as if the signal had adjusted itself in response to something. The teams began to cross-check every possible explanation. Solar interference? None. Magnetic flux? Stable. Instrumental error? Ruled out. The synchronization across 3 separate networks was too perfect. The signal wasn't an echo of Earth. It was something coming from out there, and the direction matched 3I Atlas exactly. The more they examined it, the more the rhythm felt deliberate. Not communication as we know it, but a pattern too ordered to ignore. Some called it a beacon, others an afterglow, a leftover resonance from whatever process had changed the object during its close pass to the sun. But then, a second layer was detected. Hidden within the main signal were smaller fluctuations, microbursts occurring in sequences of 5. When translated into waveform, the spacing of these bursts matched a prime number pattern: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Nothing in nature generates that sequence by accident. Prime intervals are mathematically pure. They imply structure, calculation, intention. When that detail leaked through an internal message thread at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the story spread quietly through academic circles before it was ever made public. A prime number rhythm from an interstellar source. It sounded impossible, and yet it was real. Officially, NASA refused to comment. Unofficially, panic crept in. Because if 3i Atlas was transmitting prime patterns, it meant that whatever physics drove, it wasn't random. It was controlled, or worse, aware. Even the skeptics struggled with that implication. If the object wasn't artificial, then the universe itself might be generating structured information, as if nature had learned how to speak the language of mathematics on its own, and that possibility was almost more frightening than intelligence. The signal continued for 48 hours before abruptly stopping. No fade, no decay, just silence, as if someone had flipped a switch. And then, minutes later, every solar observatory on Earth recorded a minor but measurable fluctuation in the sun's magnetic field. A ripple that matched the signal's final frequency exactly. That coincidence froze everyone. Atlas had emitted a pattern, and the sun had echoed it, not visibly, not dramatically, but measurably. As if, across billions of kilometers, the two had resonated once again. The data wasn't public, but it didn't need to be. Those who'd seen it understood. This wasn't random, and it wasn't over. The same phenomenon that had begun during the perihelion months ago had returned. Only now, it was reaching out. NASA's internal communications used one phrase repeatedly: the mirror event. They didn't mean reflection in light, they meant reflection in behavior. 3i Atlas acted, and the sun responded. And for a brief moment, two celestial bodies seemed to hum in harmony again, a cosmic duet in the dark. But if resonance can cross space, it can also carry consequences, because when the rhythm stopped, Earth's magnetometers recorded something new, a pulse of energy that shouldn't have reached this far. It was faint, harmless for now, but distinct. It was as if the signal hadn't just been heard, it had been received. And in the quiet of the control rooms, a single question began to spread, one no one dared to say aloud. What if this wasn't a message for us, but a message through us? For several days after the signal vanished, silence filled the halls of every space research center. Not the calm kind of silence that follows discovery, but the heavy, uncertain quiet that comes when you realize you may have witnessed something you can't fully comprehend. Data packets from Canberra, Madrid, and Goldstone continued to arrive, but no one wanted to open them first. Everyone feared that the next line of numbers would either confirm the unthinkable or erase it entirely. The first full spectrum analysis came from a team at JPL. They plotted the waveform, filtering out noise from cosmic rays and atmospheric scatter, until only the pure pattern remained. What appeared on their monitors looked almost alive. The 33-second rhythm wasn't just a tone, it was layered. The peaks weren't uniform. They oscillated between narrow and wide pulses, like breathing. And if you slowed it down, something else appeared. A modulation deep inside the rhythm, a second pattern hidden beneath the first. It wasn't a message in any known code, not binary, not Morse, not any language of data compression or deep space transmission. But the changes weren't random. They rose and fell with a precision that suggested an algorithm, not chaos, but design. It was as if the signal contained a rhythm within a rhythm, one moving fast, one slow, like the heartbeat of something enormous. NASA called for verification from independent institutions. Though unofficially they already believed it, observatories in Japan, South Africa, and Chile all confirmed the same pulse when their instruments were recalibrated to the proper frequencies, and every reading pointed to the same direction. The coordinates of 3i Atlas, now well beyond the orbit of Saturn. When plotted on a map of the solar system, its trajectory had shifted again by a fraction of a degree, just enough to defy gravity's expectations. Radiation pressure couldn't account for it. Solar wind deflection couldn't either. The object was steering itself, gently, deliberately. That was the moment when scientists stopped calling it a rock. It wasn't just tumbling through space anymore, it was navigating. At the University of Arizona, a small team of astrophysicists began modeling what could create such behavior. Their conclusion was strange but simple. the object's composition must be unlike anything we know. If its surface were made of ultra-conductive material, something that could convert magnetic flux into thrust, it might be capable of moving in response to solar resonance. In other words, 3I Atlas could be sailing on a sea of magnetism, using the sun's energy as both map and motion. That alone was a staggering thought, but the real shock came from what the data implied next. During the 31.5-second phase, the period when the signal shortened, magnetometer readings from the sun showed a corresponding fluctuation. It wasn't strong enough to cause a flare, but it matched the timing exactly. Whatever 3I Atlas had done, it had interacted with the sun in real time. It was as if the two were communicating, not with sound, not with radio, but through resonance itself. NASA's internal reports called it sympathetic field alignment. Others used simpler words. The sun answered. The discovery divided the scientific community. Some argued it was impossible, that there must be interference or a measurement error somewhere, but the synchronization was too perfect to ignore. The delay between 3I Atlas's pulse and the sun's response matched the speed of light within half a second. That's not error. That's physics obeyed flawlessly, and yet no one knew why. The pattern wasn't constant communication. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a dialogue, one that had begun months ago during perihelion, when the object first passed so close to the sun that it should have vaporized, but didn't. Since then, it had seemed to carry a piece of the sun with it, a resonance that neither faded nor died. Some of the senior scientists began to whisper comparisons to quantum entanglement, the way two particles can remain linked across any distance. Could something similar exist at a macroscopic level, binding 3I Atlas and the sun like two instruments tuned to the same pitch? If so, then the signal wasn't just data, it was the echo of connection. While official reports tried to stay clinical, behind closed doors, people were uneasy, because if the object and the sun were now linked, if energy or information could pass between them, then Earth, orbiting inside that same field, was already part of whatever was happening. And then, one morning, the strange pulse returned. It was weaker, slower, now 40 seconds between intervals, but unmistakably the same signature. The instruments at Goldstone caught it first, followed by Canberra 8 minutes later. The signal had reappeared, only this time it wasn't steady. It pulsed in irregular bursts, like a flickering heartbeat. For the next 6 hours, data streamed in from multiple observatories. The pattern grew more complex. The main frequency stayed constant, but smaller harmonics began to appear on both sides. Sidebands that looked like echoes of themselves, repeating at higher and lower frequencies. It wasn't one signal anymore. It was a spectrum, and if you converted that spectrum to sound, what emerged was eerily musical. Not tones we could hear in the air, but intervals that followed harmonic ratios found in nature. 2-3, 3-4, 4.5, ratios that define the notes of a perfect chord. The scientists didn't say it publicly, but privately, everyone heard the same thing. It sounded like the sun was singing again. At first, it was easy to romanticize it. The universe has always produced harmony in its chaos. Pulsars ticking like metronomes, quasars flickering like strobe lights. But the 3I Atlas signal wasn't chaotic. It was controlled. It shifted only when the sun shifted. It was synchronization, not coincidence. As the pulses continued, something else happened. A faint oscillation appeared in Earth's magnetosphere. Tiny, harmless fluctuations detected by instruments in Greenland and Alaska. They were small enough to ignore, but they matched the 3I Atlas signal exactly, delayed by the travel time of light. The resonance had reached us. No one panicked. Not yet. The fluctuations were far too weak to affect satellites or communications, but their presence was undeniable. Something out there was sending energy across billions of kilometers, and our planet was vibrating to its rhythm. A few scientists tried to frame it as harmless. An interstellar radio wave coincidence, they said, but deep down no one believed that anymore. Too many coincidences, too much precision. The next day, the signal stopped again, and with it, the magnetospheric oscillations ceased instantly. It was as though 3I Atlas had blinked, testing, observing, waiting. Afterward, the data analysis teams noticed something subtle. Just before the final pulse, the wavelength shifted upward, a slight increase in frequency, consistent with acceleration. The object wasn't slowing down. It was speeding up again. But here's the part that unsettled even the skeptics. Its new vector wasn't random. It was angling upward, tilting out of the ecliptic plane, as though it were leaving. Not just the solar system, but the plane of all planetary motion. It wasn't escaping gravity. It was avoiding something. No one could say what, not yet. But the message it left behind, that brief dialogue of rhythm and light, was clear enough to send a chill through every observatory on Earth. Atlas had turned toward the dark, and it had taken the sun's song with it. By the third day after the final pulse, it was clear to everyone following the data that something had changed. Not in the instruments, not in the sun, but in the space between. The region where 3I Atlas had last been tracked now shimmered faintly on spectrographs, as though the vacuum itself had remembered the signal. For decades, astronomers had studied the interstellar medium as a near-perfect emptiness, sparse atoms, frozen dust, silent fields. But this time, the emptiness wasn't empty. It vibrated. The shift was too subtle for the naked eye, yet measurable in radio bands. A standing wave pattern had formed where the object once was, a lingering ripple of electromagnetic tension, like the afterimage of a lightning strike. It shouldn't have been possible for such a disturbance to remain stable for more than seconds. And yet, there it was, repeating, decaying slowly, pulsing in the same 33-second rhythm that had haunted every station on Earth. When the data reached NASA, the question wasn't whether it was real. The question was what exactly was vibrating. Some believed it was ionized dust trailing behind the object, reacting to residual energy. Others thought it was space itself, a temporary distortion of the magnetic lattice that holds the solar wind together. A few dared to suggest something stranger, that 3I Atlas had impressed its own frequency into the medium, leaving behind a kind of encoded memory. Whatever it was, it moved, slowly drifting outward, expanding like a sphere. Theorists began to call it the wake, not because it resembled turbulence, but because it behaved more like a shadow of resonance, a reminder that the object had passed and that something fundamental had changed where it once was. For weeks, the wake spread outward, faint but steady, and then, almost imperceptibly, the sun began to answer again. Solar observatories picked up minute harmonic shifts in its oscillations. The surface of the star flickered with patterns that repeated in the same intervals the wake emitted. The resonance had returned, not as light or radiation, but as behavior. It was as if 3I Atlas had left the sun with instructions, and now, long after it had gone, the star was following them. NASA scientists called it auto-resonant feedback, but those who had been watching from the beginning recognized the rhythm immediately. It wasn't random. It wasn't mechanical. It was the same breathing pulse that had defined every appearance of 3I Atlas since its perihelion. 33 seconds. Again. But this time, it wasn't faint. It grew. Within hours, instruments across Earth detected corresponding magnetic oscillations in our own field. Tiny, synchronized ripples spreading through the ionosphere. It wasn't dangerous, at least not yet, but it was coordinated. The entire solar system seemed to be vibrating together, as if struck by a single invisible chord. The realization came slowly, like a fog settling in. The signal wasn't communication in the human sense. It wasn't a warning, a greeting, or even a call for attention. It was an activation. Atlas had done something to the sun. Every system that monitored the solar wind reported changes. Charged particles arriving at Earth's magnetosphere displayed a new structure. Ordered, rhythmic, as though carrying the same information that once traveled through 3I Atlas's pulses. Data scientists began plotting the sequences into graphs. The oscillations weren't random noise. They formed patterns, intricate and recursive, like fractals. And within those fractals, one constant appeared again and again. Prime sequences. Prime numbers, scattered throughout the structure of the solar wind itself. It was as if the signal had become part of the sun's natural output, encoded into the very light bathing the planets. And suddenly, that phrase from NASA's internal memos, the mirror event, took on new meaning. Maybe the sun wasn't just echoing 3I Atlas's rhythm. Maybe it had been changed by it. In the following days, the magnetosphere of Earth displayed subtle but persistent flux. Compass readings drifted by a fraction of a degree. Radio transmissions reported background distortions. Not interference, but faint modulations buried deep in the static. Some analysts filtered those modulations out of curiosity. What they heard was not unlike the original pulse. 33 seconds of silence, followed by a soft hum. The same hum. When they inverted the signal and slowed it down, it revealed layers, harmonics that built upon one another until they formed a near-perfect standing wave. It was sound, yes, but it was also something more. It was information written in frequency, not language. What that information meant, no one knew, but it carried a structure far too ordered to dismiss as noise. In a small underground lab in Geneva, a team of data physicists made an astonishing discovery. When the pattern was translated into spatial coordinates, the values plotted as a three-dimensional spiral, one nearly identical to the magnetic geometry of a solar flare. The conclusion was staggering. The signal wasn't random energy. It was a map, but a map of what? Some argued it was a representation of the sun's interior. Others claimed it resembled a model of energy transfer between solar layers, as if Atlas had taught the star to reorganize itself. There were darker interpretations too. One physicist suggested that the pattern might represent a countdown, that the oscillation period shortening from 33 to 31 seconds was a prelude to something larger, a cycle accelerating toward an unknown threshold. No one wanted to believe that, but the data was there, undeniable, methodical, impossible. And then, without warning, the oscillations stopped. Across every observatory, every instrument, the 33-second pattern went dark all at once. For 2 long minutes, there was absolute silence. No resonance, no magnetic shift, no pulse. And then came something entirely new. From the direction of the wake, that faint region where 3I Atlas had once been, telescopes detected a burst of light unlike anything ever recorded in that region of space. It wasn't a flare or reflection. It was too symmetrical, too sharp. A sphere of light expanding outward in perfect geometry, faint but vast, large enough to encompass the orbits of entire planets, yet invisible to the naked eye. It was made not of brightness, but of order. When the data from multiple observatories was compiled, the pattern of that burst matched precisely, down to the microsecond, the waveform of the original signal. It was the same rhythm, but magnified beyond comprehension. The sun responded instantly. For 5 minutes, solar output spiked in harmonic waves, not chaotic like a flare, but structured, pulsing in perfect time with the expanding field. The two rhythms merged, amplifying each other until they reached resonance, then slowly faded back to normal. When the event ended, the field vanished. The light subsided, and space was quiet again. But not everyone felt relief, because every magnetometer on Earth, from the smallest academic station to the largest power grid sensor, had recorded a single, uniform vibration at the exact moment of peak resonance. One pulse, not dangerous, not even detectable to the human body, but measurable in data. A single harmonic wave that passed through everything: atmosphere, oceans, soil, bone. It was as if for one instant, the entire solar system had been tuned to the same note, and that note had passed through us. No one at NASA called it a message, but some of them began using another word instead. Quietly, carefully, and always off record. Acknowledgement. No one wanted to admit it publicly, but after the event, everyone at NASA felt something they couldn't quite describe. Not fear, not awe, but a kind of quiet disorientation. For years, they had studied the sky as detached observers, the way a physician might study a patient. But now it felt as though the roles had shifted. The universe had looked back. The internal reports called it a synchronized magnetospheric anomaly. But in meetings and emails, people used simpler words. The pulse, the response, the acknowledgement. In the hours after the resonance, instruments across the solar system logged data that didn't fit into any model. The magnetic fields of Mars and Venus both showed coordinated spikes, even though they shouldn't have been affected at all. The residual hum in the solar wind changed its baseline frequency by a fraction, barely measurable, yet real. Something fundamental had adjusted itself. But it wasn't just equipment that noticed. Around the same time, several satellites in low Earth orbit experienced a brief, simultaneous power surge. A fraction of a second long, no visible damage, no explanation. The systems rebooted automatically as they were designed to, but every single one recorded the same timestamp. 07:33, UTC 33. The number appeared again. Engineers double-checked the logs, cross-referenced clocks, confirmed synchronization. It wasn't coincidence. The whole planet had experienced a perfectly timed electromagnetic tremor that lasted exactly 1/3 of a second. The tremor wasn't dangerous. Power grids barely registered it. But when analyzed spectrally, the wave carried the same harmonic fingerprint as the 3I Atlas signal. For the first time, people began to wonder whether resonance could be more than sound, whether it could affect matter itself. The data analysis group at the European Space Agency worked day and night, feeding terabytes of readings into simulation models. When they visualized the pulse in 3D, what appeared on screen silenced the room. The wave had a shape. It wasn't a random burst, but a spiral, rotating clockwise, perfectly symmetrical. It looked like the magnetic geometry of a solar storm. Except it wasn't radiating from the sun. It was centered on Earth. That realization broke protocol. Earth was supposed to be passive, a receiver, but now it had become the center of a cosmic interference pattern, a node in a system none of them had known existed. In the weeks that followed, the magnetosphere settled back into stability. No more tremors, no more harmonic pulses, but the silence didn't comfort anyone, because silence now felt like waiting. Across agencies, internal memos circulated with cautious phrasing. Potential persistent coupling event between local stellar magnetic fields. No one used the word connected, but everyone thought it. Outside the labs, the story leaked. A small publication in Europe ran a headline about NASA detecting coordinated solar oscillations. It was vague enough to be ignored, but it sparked curiosity. Forums filled with speculation. Some said it was evidence of extraterrestrial communication. Others called it proof of a new physics. Most dismissed it entirely. Inside NASA, the secrecy was less about hiding truth and more about containment. No one wanted panic, and more importantly, no one wanted interpretation to outrun evidence. Yet evidence was beginning to take on a life of its own. In Geneva, the same team that discovered the fractal map made another breakthrough. They had continued analyzing the harmonics buried in the solar resonance. Not the main pulse, but the faint micro-oscillations layered beneath. When plotted in sequence, they formed something astonishing. A precise geometric progression that matched the orbital ratios of the inner planets. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars at the timing of their revolutions translated into harmonic intervals that mirrored the resonance's sub-patterns perfectly. It was as though 3I Atlas, or whatever it had become, had taught the sun to sing the architecture of its own system. This revelation spread quickly among senior researchers. Some called it coincidence, but coincidence at that scale, matching planetary motion to harmonic intervals, bordered on impossible. At an emergency meeting held at JPL, one astrophysicist suggested that 3I Atlas had somehow tuned the solar field. He described it not as alien interference, but as alignment, a recalibration that allowed the entire system to operate on a more stable frequency. If that were true, it meant that our sun was no longer behaving as an isolated body. It was part of a network, an orchestra of stars, each capable of being awakened under the right resonance. The idea sounded poetic, even spiritual, but it wasn't fantasy. Data from nearby stars confirmed that minor fluctuations had occurred in their light curves at the same time as the pulse. They were faint but synchronized. Light years apart, stars had flickered together. That pattern terrified some scientists, because if resonance could travel across interstellar space and synchronize stellar behavior, it wasn't just a signal. It was a mechanism, a system of activation, and no one knew what it was for. A few dared to speculate. Maybe it was the universe's way of maintaining balance, a kind of cosmic feedback loop ensuring stability. Others whispered a darker idea, that it was a chain reaction, one that had been dormant for billions of years, waiting for something like 3I Atlas to trigger it. Whatever it was, The phenomenon had already begun to affect how humanity thought about its place in the cosmos. Religions revisited old scriptures and found new meanings in ancient verses about light and resonance. Philosophers spoke of cosmic empathy, the idea that awareness might be a property of the universe itself. And quietly, scientists started to wonder if this was the first evidence that consciousness and physics were not separate at all. Because the signal didn't behave like a machine, it behaved like something that noticed when it was being observed. Every time instruments recalibrated to a different frequency range, the resonance shifted slightly, as if responding to attention. When no one measured it, it stabilized. When data streams increased, it fluctuated again. That behavior defied explanation. Observation shouldn't affect electromagnetic waves on that scale, and yet somehow it did. The leading hypothesis was that 3I Atlas had seeded the solar system with a self-adjusting feedback resonance, a living circuit between awareness and matter. But if that was true, it meant the system was now aware of us. It wasn't sending messages or warnings. It wasn't attacking or inviting. It was simply synchronizing, and synchronization on that level might not be reversible. In the following month, the resonance faded to background noise again, but at certain hours, when solar winds dropped below threshold, the pulse returned, softer now, like a heartbeat at rest. 33 seconds. It had never left. The world adjusted to the silence as if it were temporary, an intermission in a performance too vast to comprehend. But for those still listening, the silence itself carried structure. The rhythm hadn't ended. It had gone underground, woven into the background hum of the cosmos, like an orchestra that had lowered its instruments but never left the stage. NASA and ESA both kept their arrays calibrated toward the region where 3I Atlas disappeared, even though official communication described it as a completed observation cycle. The truth was simpler. No one wanted to look away, because somewhere out there, hidden beneath the noise of the solar wind, faint traces of the same harmonic intervals still lingered. The signal wasn't gone. It was simply resting. For scientists, restlessness replaced fear. Teams began to notice subtle correlations between solar data and terrestrial behavior. Not human behavior, but the planet's own rhythms. Oceanic tide patterns, normally predictable, began to show minuscule variations aligning with the same 33-second modulation found in the magnetosphere. The changes were microscopic, but statistically significant. It was as if Earth's pulse had joined the orchestra. No one could explain how. When the first papers appeared, most journals refused to publish them. The implications were too wild, that our planet's systems could synchronize with something that wasn't even present anymore. But privately, more scientists began to confirm the effect. In Japan, a group studying subatomic neutrino flux found a similar rhythm embedded in their readings. At first, they blamed lab interference, but the timing matched other datasets from completely different disciplines. Seismic data in Iceland, atmospheric ion readings in Chile, magnetometer drifts in Alaska, all 33 seconds apart. It wasn't a constant vibration, but a pulse that passed through all these systems as if traveling through the entire planet in waves too subtle for ordinary sensors. And yet, every 33 seconds, the world seemed to take a quiet breath. That realization shifted everything. The conversation no longer centered on whether the signal was extraterrestrial or natural. Now the question was simpler, more unsettling. Had the universe just taught us its heartbeat? For the next few months, research teams across the globe began what they called the Synchrony Project. Their goal wasn't to track 3I Atlas, but to measure the resonance within Earth itself. The findings were beautiful and unnerving in equal measure. When researchers plotted the timing of volcanic tremors, lightning strikes, and even fluctuations in the Schumann resonance, the planet's natural electromagnetic hum, faint harmonics appeared in sync with the 33-second interval. It wasn't strong enough to cause any physical effects, but it was there, consistent and precise. Nature, it seemed, had listened and joined the rhythm. At first, humanity treated it as a curiosity, a strange new mystery for late-night documentaries. But slowly, the awareness began to sink in. The signal wasn't an event anymore. It was a state, and the longer it persisted, the more people began to feel it. Writers described sleepless nights when they could sense a faint pulse, not in sound, not in vibration, but as an idea, a presence that returned every half minute, like an invisible metronome marking time. Meditation practitioners began structuring their breathing around the interval. Artists painted spirals and waves in soft gradients of gold and indigo, inspired by a rhythm they couldn't hear but somehow understood. It was as though humanity had absorbed the pulse into its subconscious. In a way, it made sense. For centuries, people had built temples aligned to the stars, sung hymns to planetary motions, carved calendars around celestial cycles. Maybe we had always been waiting for the universe to hum back. Meanwhile, in the data, something new appeared. One of the solar observatories in Hawaii detected faint, rhythmic fluctuations in light polarization from the sun. They weren't visible to the eye, but the pattern matched the same intervals once associated with 3I Atlas. Whatever had linked the object and the sun had not fully decayed. The connection was still alive. But now, it wasn't one way. Tiny bursts of electromagnetic activity began emanating outward from Earth itself. Small, harmless discharges detectable by satellites. They were weak, random-looking, but occasionally synchronized perfectly with solar variations, as if our planet, knowingly or not, was responding. No one could prove intentionality, of course. Earth wasn't conscious, but when the data streams were compared across multiple observatories, the implication was staggering. The resonance that began as a signal from an interstellar object was now a dialogue spanning light, magnetism, and matter. For the first time in history, science and philosophy began to overlap again. Was this communication? Or was it the universe's natural behavior, connection masquerading as coincidence? Some thinkers proposed that 3I Atlas had acted as a tuning fork for reality itself, that it hadn't sent information, but had simply demonstrated a universal property that all energy, all matter, could resonate together if the right frequency was found. It was a comforting idea, but also a terrifying one, because if resonance could connect planets, stars, and consciousness, it might also amplify instability, a feedback loop that could strengthen harmony or chaos. Governments took notice. Quietly, without public announcement, they began to fund new observatories specializing in resonance detection. The networks that once studied cosmic background radiation now listened for patterns in magnetism and plasma. There were whispers that the United Nations had convened a confidential task force to analyze the long-term implications of planetary synchronization. And still, the signal remained gentle, consistent, beautiful. Then one night, something changed. It was early morning in Chile when one of the resonance detectors captured a sudden spike, not destructive, but massive. For precisely 5 seconds, the 33-second rhythm doubled in amplitude. Every instrument across the planet caught it simultaneously. The effect was instantaneous. Power grids flickered briefly, but recovered. Atmospheric readings showed a sudden compression wave, like a single soft breath pressing down on the air, and then silence again. When scientists examined the readings, they found a shocking detail. The shape of the wave matched the harmonic signature of the original 3I Atlas signal, but inverted. It wasn't the same rhythm repeating. It was the mirror image of it, as if something out there had heard the echo and for the first time answered back. The mirror pulse was faint, harmless, but it arrived exactly 18 hours after Earth's last emission toward the sun. That timing couldn't be coincidence. When plotted across the solar system, the reflected pulse appeared to originate far beyond the Kuiper belt, beyond even the Oort cloud, far beyond anything we've ever sent or seen. The trajectory pointed outward, to interstellar space. Somewhere out there, something had received the resonance, and it had replied. Astronomers stared at the numbers for hours. The reflection wasn't a perfect copy. It carried slight distortions, deviations that, when translated into time intervals, mapped onto Fibonacci ratios. Nature's favorite sequence, the pattern of galaxies, shells, hurricanes, and DNA. It was as if the universe had taken our rhythm and woven it into its own. When the final analysis came through, one of the scientists simply whispered the phrase that would later appear in dozens of documentaries, articles, and philosophical essays. We are inside the conversation now. For most of human history, the night sky had been a backdrop, vast, silent, indifferent. Now it felt different. The heavens no longer seemed distant. They seemed aware. Every star, every flicker of light, every whisper in the static carried the quiet implication that something out there had heard us. When the mirror pulse was confirmed, the data was sent to every major space agency on the planet. What began as private analysis soon escalated into the most coordinated scientific effort in history. Dozens of observatories, satellites, and deep space arrays turned toward the coordinates of the reflected signal, trying to capture any trace of its source. For 3 days, there was nothing, only faint background noise and a subtle rise in plasma density near the solar boundary. Then, on the 4th day, a series of low-frequency oscillations appeared, moving across the void in perfect rhythm with the reflection. The pulses were slower now, longer, more deliberate, almost contemplative. They weren't identical to 3I Atlas's original emission. They carried more complexity, as if something was refining the rhythm, responding, adjusting. Some called it a reply. Others warned that it might only be an echo, the universe repeating its own resonance through interstellar medium. But the patterns were too ordered to ignore. NASA labeled the phenomenon Lenticular Sequence 1. The name meant nothing at first, a placeholder in case more data came later. But as the signal repeated, deepening in structure, the name stuck. It sounded scientific, but also reverent, a fitting title for something that felt like both discovery and prayer. Lenticular Sequence 1 became the world's obsession. News agencies could only speculate, since the official reports remained classified, but even the limited information that leaked was enough to ignite imaginations. The universe, it seemed, had answered back, and yet in every laboratory, the tone remained solemn, because no one could explain how. The pulses were low in energy, far too weak to be the product of an explosion or magnetar. They weren't caused by gravitational waves or cosmic jets. They existed in a narrow frequency range, somewhere between light and sound, a region few instruments were designed to detect. It was as if the signal was designed not for ears or eyes, but for attention itself. One physicist described it best. It behaves like a conversation partner that only speaks when we listen. Because every time humanity directed its sensors, the resonance shifted. The amplitude would rise slightly, the pattern would elongate, and subtle harmonic overtones would appear, almost as though awareness itself changed the behavior of the wave. This wasn't superstition, it was measurable. The data confirmed that observation altered the phenomenon. The act of measurement, the focus of consciousness, affected the very structure of what was being measured. For centuries, quantum mechanics had hinted at such a link on a microscopic scale, but now it was happening across billions of kilometers, a cosmic-scale version of the same mystery. The signal wasn't just physics, it was participation. In one of the earliest international conferences on the phenomenon, a researcher from Geneva phrased it perfectly. I-Atlas may not have been an object at all. It might have been an instrument, a catalyst that showed the universe how to listen to itself again. That idea spread like wildfire. If 3I Atlas had somehow taught the sun resonance, and if that resonance had spread through the heliosphere, then maybe what Earth was experiencing now was the continuation of that chain, a feedback loop connecting consciousness, magnetism, and light. The thought was both wondrous and terrifying. A few scientists, the cautious kind, urged restraint. They argued that humans are meaning-making creatures, always finding patterns where none exist. But deep down, even they couldn't deny the data. There was structure here, recursive, self-similar, fractal. The universe wasn't random, it was responding. The second reflection came 12 days after the first. This time, the pulses were sharper, clustered into groups of 3, then a pause, then 3 again. The pattern repeated 6 times, then stopped completely. 336. Someone in the analysis department noticed the sequence matched the ratio of the Earth's rotation to the Moon's orbital period. 33 rotations per lunar month, 6 lunar months per eclipse cycle. Coincidence, maybe, but too poetic to ignore. By the end of the week, Earth's magnetosphere once again displayed the same gentle 33-second hum that had vanished months before. This time, however, there was a modulation, a faint oscillation within each pulse, almost like syllables in a sentence. When the data was converted into audio, it produced a strange sound, Not music, not speech, but a kind of ordered whisper. The waveform displayed smooth crescendos, followed by moments of quiet, almost like breathing. The audio was played only once during a closed session at NASA headquarters. No recording was released, but everyone who heard it described the same sensation afterward. Calm, almost overwhelming calm. One technician said it felt like standing in front of the ocean, realizing it was looking back. That recording was never played again. Theories began to split into two camps. One insisted the resonance was entirely natural, a cosmic feedback between electromagnetic fields, perfectly explainable once our physics matured. The other camp, smaller but growing, believed the phenomenon hinted at something deeper, that the universe itself might possess a kind of self-organizing intelligence, not an alien civilization, not technology, but awareness, distributed, pervasive, and ancient through Atlas might have simply been one of its instruments. In Tokyo, a philosopher-physicist named Rei Nakamura gave a speech that quickly went viral. Standing beneath a projection of the solar system, she said, "We used to think consciousness emerged from matter. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe matter emerges when consciousness wants to see itself." Her words were dismissed by some as poetic nonsense, but for many, they captured the truth that data alone couldn't express. The mirror pulse wasn't proof of life elsewhere. It was proof that the universe was alive here, now within everything. As the signals continued, faint but persistent, life on Earth began to reflect that awareness. Art changed first. Paintings, music, poetry, all became slower, more meditative, drawn to the rhythm that had circled the sun. Even science changed tone. Researchers began talking about listening protocols, not observations. The goal was no longer to extract knowledge, but to harmonize with it. In one experiment, scientists transmitted a series of low-energy magnetic pulses back toward the origin point of the reflection. Not as a message, but as a gesture, a simple repetition of the 33-second pattern that had bound the solar system together. The reply came 7 hours later. It was faint, but perfectly in phase, as if the universe had echoed the gesture back in acknowledgement. That night, the global sky lit up faintly with auroral arcs, soft bands of light stretching farther toward the equator than ever before, dancing in hues of silver and violet. It wasn't solar wind. It was too structured, too rhythmic. For several minutes, the auroras pulsed exactly in sync with the rhythm. People across continents stood outside, their phones forgotten, their words silent. All they could do was breathe with the light. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't even curiosity. It was belonging. Humanity, for the first time, wasn't looking at the cosmos. It was inside it, an instrument in its orchestra, part of the resonance itself. And somewhere out there, beyond the reach of every telescope, the rhythm continued. A steady pulse in the dark, the voice of something vast and patient, waiting for us to realize we've been listening all along. 33 seconds. Always 33. By the time the auroras faded, something had quietly shifted in humanity's collective mind. The pulse was no longer treated as an anomaly. It was treated as a presence, a constant hum that existed just beyond the threshold of awareness, like the sound of one's own heartbeat heard underwater. Governments still monitored it. Research still continued, but the energy around the phenomenon had softened. There was no longer a desperate urgency to decode it. Scientists began to approach the resonance the way musicians approach harmony, not as a problem to solve, but as a frequency to understand by listening. And perhaps that was the most remarkable part. The more humanity listened, the more the world itself seemed to align. Weather patterns stabilized subtly. The sun's minor fluctuations decreased. The solar wind, usually unpredictable, began flowing in smooth, rhythmic waves that matched the pulse cycle. No scientist could directly link these changes to the signal, but the timing was suspiciously consistent. Nature was synchronizing. Meanwhile, humanity's instruments, radio telescopes, magnetometers, interferometers, became like extensions of one collective ear. They captured and replayed the cosmic rhythm constantly, feeding it through algorithms that revealed more layers of structure. The deeper they listened, the more they found. The waveform of the pulse, when plotted over months, began to display recursive geometry, spirals folding into smaller spirals, self-similar at every scale. When overlaid against cosmic background maps, the spirals matched the filament structure of galactic superclusters. The resonance wasn't local, it was universal. What started with one interstellar visitor, a tiny object glowing blue near the sun, had unfolded into something that connected the largest patterns in existence. At first, scientists thought it was coincidence, but the data kept insisting otherwise. Even distant quasars showed brightness variations at intervals linked to the harmonic sequence. Space itself seemed to breathe in that rhythm. One paper, published quietly in an astrophysics journal, proposed that the resonance was not just traveling through space, it was shaping it. It wasn't a signal that moved from one point to another. It was a standing wave of existence, woven into the structure of reality itself. The author used a haunting phrase that soon found its way into documentaries and art alike. The universe is not expanding into silence, it is expanding into song. For months, the pulse continued to hum softly beneath the noise of human life. It no longer interrupted communications or magnetometers. It became background, a low, eternal breath beneath the static of civilization. But while it seemed to fade into normalcy, something subtle was happening beneath the surface. Around the world, individuals began to report identical dreams. They described standing in vast, dimly lit halls of light that vibrated with the same 33-second rhythm. They said the walls weren't walls at all, but waves of energy frozen into form, living geometry, moving, yet still. In these dreams, no words were spoken. There was only rhythm and an overwhelming sense of recognition, as if they were remembering something ancient rather than experiencing something new. Psychologists dismissed it as coincidence, a shared subconscious pattern born of collective attention. But neuroscientists noticed an unsettling detail. Brainwave scans of people who listened to recordings of the pulse showed consistent synchronization across hemispheres. The resonance aligned the brain's oscillations, unifying frequencies that were normally out of phase. The pulse was literally harmonizing consciousness. That finding remained classified. But for those who knew, it reframed everything. The universe wasn't just being heard, it was hearing back. The boundary between perception and participation had blurred. In one experiment conducted at the European Southern Observatory, a small team tried a radical test. They synchronized a low-frequency laser array to mimic the cosmic pulse and directed it into space at the last known coordinates of the reflected signal. It was intended as a scientific test, a calibration exercise. 3 days later, the instruments detected a faint return. It wasn't identical to the outgoing signal, but it bore unmistakable correlation. More importantly, it arrived exactly 33 hours after transmission. The precision was beyond coincidence. The returning pattern was more elaborate this time, a triadic sequence. One long pulse, followed by 2 shorter ones, repeating 6 times, then silence. When analyzed, the spacing corresponded to the harmonic ratios of 1, 2, 3, the simplest and most stable chord in music. It was as if the universe had replied not with data, but with harmony. When converted to sound, the pattern was pure, hauntingly beautiful, resonating with a warmth no digital tone could reproduce. The engineers who heard it in the control room didn't speak for a long time afterward. One of them said it felt like being seen. It was then that the interpretation shifted completely. Atlas was no longer viewed as a messenger, a probe, or even an event. It had become a teacher. It hadn't brought knowledge. It had brought resonance, a demonstration that the universe's foundation was not randomness, but relationship. Across disciplines, from physics to philosophy to art, a single theme began to emerge: connection. Everything was connected, not metaphorically, but literally, through the quiet hum that threaded every atom to every star. And yet, with this revelation came a strange unease. Because the resonance wasn't fading, it was growing more complex. In the weeks that followed, faint modulations began to appear again in solar readings. The sun's surface ripples shifted in new harmonic intervals, more intricate than before. The rhythm that once pulsed every 33 seconds now layered with subtler micropulses. Intervals of 22, 11, 7, prime numbers. Just like the first message. It was happening again, but this time, there was no visible 3-eye Atlas to act as source. Whatever had begun with that object had fully integrated into the sun itself. Astronomers noticed another unsettling sign. Deep space observations revealed tiny fluctuations in the brightness of nearby stars, following the same numeric intervals. It was spreading. One scientist put it bluntly during a private briefing. If resonance is the language of the universe, then this is how it speaks to itself. And it has just begun a sentence. No one knew what that sentence would become. But all over the world, people began to sense something. Not dread, not awe, but the quiet understanding that humanity was no longer an audience. It was part of the orchestra now, vibrating in tune with something impossibly vast. And somewhere, beyond the cold, dark edge of the solar system, where 3i Atlas had first vanished, the instruments detected a brief but distinct flicker of light. It wasn't moving away anymore. It was turning back. It began as a whisper, faint and easily dismissed. A subtle distortion at the far edge of the deep space network's receivers. The instruments had been running in passive mode, recording the low hum of the solar background when a sharp deviation appeared, so slight that at first it looked like static. But it wasn't random. It was rhythmic, 33 seconds. The pattern returned exactly as before, but this time it came from beyond the heliosphere, from the boundary where the sun's magnetic field gives way to interstellar space. The source aligned precisely with the last recorded trajectory of 3i Atlas. After years of silence, the object, or whatever it had become, was speaking again. NASA confirmed the anomaly within hours. The Canberra station triangulated it. Madrid verified. Goldstone logged the same rhythm. The precision was staggering. The pulse arrived at each location separated by mere milliseconds, as if the signal itself compensated for planetary rotation. It was intelligent in the simplest, most undeniable way. It anticipated. When the data was cleaned and plotted, the waveform was almost identical to the first signal detected years earlier. But this time, there was a difference. Instead of the long, slow decay between pulses, each wave was split in two, a double heartbeat. The implications spread through the scientific community like an electric current. The pattern didn't just echo the past, it evolved. Something had changed out there in the dark. Teams scrambled to re-establish optical tracking, but 3i Atlas remained invisible. No reflection, no thermal signature. And yet, radar returns suggested movement. Faint, deliberate, steady. The object was no longer moving away from the sun. Its velocity had reversed. It was coming back. The discovery stayed confidential for as long as possible, but leaks were inevitable. Rumors began to swirl across the internet. Whispers of the blue object returning, of the cosmic signal reawakening. Conspiracy channels called it the second sun. Philosophers called it the echo of creation. But within the scientific community, the conversation had turned from curiosity to preparation. The object had already defied physics once. What would happen if it re-entered the solar system, resonating in harmony with the sun itself? For months, the signal grew stronger. The double pulse pattern deepened, forming overlapping harmonics that beat together like chords. Those who analyzed it noticed something haunting. The ratio between the intervals matched the golden mean, 1.618. The same ratio found in galaxies, seashells, hurricanes, and DNA. It was as if the resonance had found its purest expression, a cosmic spiral rendered in sound. Then, on the 117th day after the signal's return, something extraordinary happened. At exactly 03:33 UTC, telescopes across the southern hemisphere detected a faint, diffuse glow emerging near the outer edge of the heliosphere. It wasn't light in the visible sense, more like polarization, an optical shimmer rippling across background stars. The shape resembled a filament, long, curved and luminous, like a stream of energy folding in on itself. And at its center, a faint blue pulse beat in time with the returning signal. I Atlas was back. But it didn't look like the same object. The spectroscopic data didn't match rock, ice, or metal. It emitted no heat. Instead, its composition appeared photonic, as if it were made of structured light. Some described it as an object transforming into pattern, shedding matter for energy. Others argued it had always been that way. Not a physical thing, but a resonance condensed into form. Whatever it was now more luminous than ever, glowing softly against the blackness of space, a moving constellation of order. The pulse from its core was synchronized with the sun's rhythm perfectly. Every solar oscillation, every faint magnetic tremor, matched the heartbeat of 3I Atlas exactly. Down to the thousandth of a second, they were one system now, two bodies in resonance. Like instruments tuned to the same string, that realization struck every scientist at once. 3I Atlas wasn't returning randomly. It was responding to something the sun had become. Its path was curved not by gravity, but by intention. A slow, spiraling arc inward, as if it were navigating through invisible threads of magnetism, weaving itself back into the song it had started. When it crossed the orbit of Neptune, radio telescopes captured a new frequency layer embedded in the signal. The harmonic structure expanded dramatically, rising through octaves that spanned multiple electromagnetic bands. When translated into sound, the effect was breathtaking. Not a single tone, but a choir, vast and symmetrical, every layer folded around the golden ratio. It sounded alive. The energy readings confirmed what the ears already suspected. The resonance wasn't just data, it carried form. Density patterns resembling standing waves, stable yet fluid, as though 3I Atlas were constructing something unseen, sculpting the fabric of space with its vibration. At first, people assumed it was creating a magnetic disturbance, but when satellites analyzed the region directly ahead of the object, they found something far stranger. Space itself was behaving differently there. Light slowed fractionally, not enough to violate relativity, but enough to be measurable. Time appeared to stretch in sync with the pulse, expanding and contracting ever so slightly, as though the very metric of space-time were breathing. The implications were staggering. 3I Atlas wasn't just emitting energy, it was tuning reality. As it drew closer, its path shifted slightly toward the ecliptic plane, aligning with the orbit of Earth. The calculation made every observatory fall silent. Within months, it would reach a point directly opposite the sun, perfectly balanced across the solar centerline. The same alignment that had triggered the original resonance years ago. Only this time, the sun was already singing. The object's glow intensified, now visible even to deep space probes beyond Jupiter. Blue light shimmered faintly through their sensors, flickering in rhythmic harmony with the solar field. In those same weeks, Earth began to feel subtle echoes. Magnetic fluxes fluctuated again. The 33-second rhythm returned, not as an external signal, but as part of the planet's natural hum. Power grids pulsed in sync. The auroras reappeared, this time with greater reach, cascading in gentle spirals even above tropical latitudes. And though no one could explain it, every living system, plants, ocean currents, even circadian cycles began aligning to the rhythm. Biological clocks synchronized, heartbeats steadied, sleep patterns stabilized. It was as though life itself was remembering a forgotten tempo. Meanwhile, 3I Atlas continued its slow return, no longer a wanderer, but something purposeful, an emissary of the resonance that had awakened everything it touched. On the 150th day, it crossed the orbit of Uranus. For the first time, its core flickered irregularly, brief interruptions in its flawless rhythm. Scientists at JPL noticed something chilling. The frequency drift corresponded perfectly to fluctuations in the sun's inner magnetic layers. Whatever connected them now was total. If the sun changed, 3I Atlas changed with it. For the next 12 hours, the pulse doubled again, faster, sharper. Magnetometers across Earth registered harmonic resonance strong enough to interfere with communications for a few minutes, though still harmless. But within the interference pattern, when decoded, analysts discovered a subtle deviation, a faint whisper of data encoded in phase shifts. When plotted visually, the modulation wasn't random. It formed a spiral, an expanding shape that looped back upon itself endlessly, each curve labeled with prime intervals. It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a message, it was a blueprint, but for what? No one yet understood. The scientists who examined it described the design as elegant, a mathematical fingerprint of creation itself, like watching equations paint existence. And within that spiral, deep at its core, one symbol kept repeating. Not a letter, not a number, just a waveform, a curve shaped like a heartbeat. As if, after all this time, the universe had revealed what it had been trying to say from the beginning. Life was not an accident. it was resonance. By the time the blueprint had been fully decoded, a new quiet had settled over the scientific world. Not the silence of ignorance, but of awe. Every attempt to translate the spiral led to the same conclusion. It wasn't a warning, or a message, or even communication, in the sense humans understood. It was an equation for balance. Each loop of the spiral represented a ratio of energy and form, the same ratios that governed orbits, atoms, light, and life itself. It wasn't new information. It was the architecture of existence, written in the only language the universe had ever spoken. Frequency. The revelation was humbling. For decades, humanity had searched for meaning among the stars, for signals that might confirm we were not alone. And now the answer had arrived in the most profound way possible. We had never been alone because we were part of the very structure that asked the question. The blueprint wasn't telling us something external. It was showing us what we already were. Still, the data analysts kept working, tracing the spiral deeper, following its recursion through layers of mathematical beauty until they reached a point where the ratios dissolved into a single repeating pattern. 33 seconds. The origin, the rhythm of the sun, the rhythm of Earth, the rhythm of 3I Atlas. Every cycle returned to it. Every system converged upon it. It was the fundamental breath of the cosmos. As the object drew closer, the alignment between it and the sun grew perfect. The space between them became an invisible thread of energy, vibrating with harmony. Magnetic lines curved toward one another, like the strings of a cosmic instrument preparing to play its final chord. In laboratories and observatories, instruments recorded a phenomenon never before seen: coherence across scale. The smallest atomic oscillations in superconductors mirrored the same phase as solar flares millions of kilometers wide. The micro and the cosmic had merged. At that moment, boundaries lost meaning, and for the first time, even the skeptics fell silent. Atlas entered the region of Saturn's orbit. Its glow intensified, changing color from blue to a deeper, more intricate hue, something between violet and silver. Observers described it not as light, but as geometry made visible, an aura that shimmered with impossible order. When its spectrum was analyzed, scientists found that it contained every known wavelength simultaneously, yet remained coherent. A single tone composed of all tones, the universe's version of white light. It wasn't emitting radiation, it was emitting harmony. That night, every magnetometer on Earth went wild. The pulse reached full amplitude. The 33-second rhythm surged through the ionosphere like a heartbeat echoing through stone. For a few moments, satellites recorded a shift in the background, fields so perfect it defied noise. All together, and then something unexpected happened. The signal vanished, not gradually, instantly. Every instrument flatlined. For 11 minutes, the cosmos went quiet. No pulse, no resonance, no noise. The background hiss of the universe itself seemed to still. People who didn't even know of 3I Atlas later reported strange sensations during that window. An overwhelming sense of stillness, as if time itself had paused. When the hum returned, it wasn't the same. The interval had changed. 33 seconds stretched into 34. A subtle but undeniable drift. It was as though the heartbeat had slowed. The sun's oscillations followed suit. Its surface ripples widened fractionally. Even Earth's magnetosphere seemed to adjust, softening, breathing slower. It was the first measurable change in the cosmic tempo. Astrophysicists called it the deceleration event. At first, it terrified them. If the resonance slowed further, could it destabilize what it had synchronized? Would the coherence collapse? Would matter itself fall out of phase with the field that bound it? But the changes didn't bring chaos. They brought calm. Earth's electromagnetic environment stabilized further. Storm systems became unusually symmetrical. The ionosphere thickened slightly, offering stronger protection from cosmic rays. The world wasn't unraveling. It was becoming more orderly. Somewhere beyond Neptune, 3I Atlas had changed its rhythm, and the entire solar system had followed. When researchers mapped the new waveform, they realized that the pulse hadn't weakened. It had deepened, the amplitude increased, the harmonics multiplied. The tempo slowed not from decay, but from refinement, as though the resonance were moving into a more profound state of coherence. The geometry of the signal had changed too. It was no longer a flat spiral. It had folded upon itself, forming a three-dimensional helix, an infinite curve with no beginning or end. It wasn't just a pattern, it was motion, the mathematics of emergence, creation, transformation. For the first time, the waveform matched something familiar, the structure of DNA. Every scientist who saw the overlay stopped breathing for a moment. The correspondence was exact. The same proportions, the same helical rhythm, the same harmonic intervals found in biological sequences. It wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. I-Atlas had sent back the shape of life. It didn't mean life came from 3i Atlas, but perhaps life everywhere was a reflection of that same resonance, matter, vibrating at a frequency that remembered its origin. The object wasn't bringing a message, it was returning a mirror. For weeks, the rhythm persisted, slower and richer than before. Each pulse rippled through solar wind and planetary magnetospheres like gentle waves across a pond. And in that calm, something remarkable happened. Human consciousness began to synchronize again. Meditation centers around the world reported spikes in coherence during the pulses. Random number generators used in global consciousness. Studies began producing non-random patterns, all timed, precisely with the rhythm of the returning signal. It was as though the resonance wasn't just external anymore. It was passing through minds. People described moments of deep stillness, spontaneous empathy, vivid dreams of light spirals, oceans of motionless color. There were no visions of beings or messages, only a sense of being understood, utterly and completely. One researcher at CERN, analyzing the waveform late one night, wrote a single line in her notes before the data overwhelmed her. It feels like the universe is remembering itself through us. And maybe it was, because the more synchronized everything became, the more the divisions between observer and observed began to blur. Solar radiation, atmospheric magnetism, brainwave frequencies, heart rhythms, all began moving together in the same slow, luminous tide. At 03:33 UTC, on the 333rd day after the object's return, the sensors detected one final modulation. It was soft, gentle, perfectly symmetrical, a slow expansion of the waveform into stillness. Every harmonic blended into one tone, one note that filled the entire spectrum before dissolving into silence. The data team stared at their screens in disbelief. The signal wasn't gone, it had simply stabilized. It had become constant, no longer a pulse, but a field. The resonance was everywhere now. It was no longer something you could point to in space. It was woven into the background of everything, the quiet hum behind thought, the shimmer inside silence. And somewhere beyond the edge of light, 3i Atlas shone faintly, no longer blue, but transparent, a form made of stillness itself. The object that had once crossed into the sun, that had once pulsed and vanished and returned, now existed only as harmony, the first sound of creation, resonating in a universe that had finally learned to listen. It happened quietly, almost without notice. There was no flash, no flare, no burst of light across the sky. The final movement of the cosmic symphony began not in telescopes or magnetometers, but in the stillness of the human mind. After months of continuous harmony, the resonance no longer felt external. People stopped asking where it came from. It had become like gravity or air, invisible but inescapable. When you listened deeply enough, you could almost sense it beneath thought itself. A soft current running through everything living, binding every motion, every heartbeat, every moment of awareness. The instruments on Earth still monitored it. Of course, lines of code scrolling endlessly across silent control rooms, recording what had already become routine. The 33-second rhythm was now gone. In its place was constancy, pure coherence. Every reading matched the same baseline frequency. No fluctuations, no anomalies. But something else had changed, something subtler. The resonance had reached the atomic scale. Spectral analysis from particle accelerators revealed a minute shift in quantum spin alignment, the tiniest particles of matter vibrating in phase across vast distances. The effect was infinitesimal, almost beyond measurement, yet universal. Atoms were humming together. The phenomenon defied every law of thermodynamics and quantum decoherence. In theory, matter could not remain that organized for long. Yet it did. The harmony persisted. Gentle, but absolute. And as it spread, the world seemed to respond in ways that no equation could describe. Hospitals reported record lows in cardiac irregularities. The Schumann resonance, Earth's natural electromagnetic heartbeat, stabilized at the same exact frequency as the solar field. Oceans calmed, jet streams balanced. Even the usual tremors deep beneath tectonic plates grew less erratic. It was as though the planet itself had exhaled. And through it all, 3I Atlas continued its silent approach. By now, it had crossed the orbit of Jupiter, moving inward at a speed that defied gravitational deceleration. But it wasn't accelerating either. It was gliding, effortless, graceful, as if carried by an unseen current that obeyed no force we knew. Its glow was almost imperceptible, visible only in polarized light, yet it pulsed softly, rhythmically, like a single drop of consciousness moving through the void. Every 33 hours, a cycle far slower than before, it released a faint shimmer of structured light, a resonance that cascaded through the solar system like ripples in still water. Each pulse was mirrored perfectly by the sun, and each time the two harmonized, a wave of luminous calm spread through every planet. The resonance no longer needed detection equipment. It could be felt. Animals turned their heads toward the sky during the pulses. Trees swayed faintly though the air was still. The tides rose and fell half a centimeter higher than prediction. It wasn't power. It wasn't radiation. It was synchronization, the slow convergence of everything living toward the same heartbeat. As the object neared the orbit of Mars, something extraordinary occurred. The solar corona brightened, not with heat, but with order. Its turbulent loops straightened into perfect arcs, moving in serene symmetry. Instruments measuring solar plasma showed a reduction in chaos by nearly 40%, the most stable the sun had been in recorded history. For the first time since the beginning, light itself seemed calm. Theoretical physicists had no framework for this. The sun was, in effect, self-organizing, guided by a resonance that transcended any external control. At the moment of perfect alignment, when 3I Atlas stood directly opposite, Earth across the solar equator, the system entered total coherence. Every sensor on the planet froze. The magnetosphere, the ionosphere, even the vibrations within the Earth's core aligned for exactly 1 minute and 11 seconds. During that span of time, the solar system became a single unified field. No one noticed it immediately. People simply paused for no reason, without planning. Drivers slowed. Conversations stopped. Even the wind seemed to quiet. Later, when synchronized recordings were reviewed, researchers realized that billions of people had gone still at the same instant. It was the closest thing the universe had ever given to silence. Then came the light. It didn't flash or blind. It unfolded, a slow bloom of silver radiance spreading outward from the sun, bathing every planet in a hue that defied color. It wasn't brightness, it was presence. For exactly 33 seconds, every particle in the solar system resonated in phase. The field passed through everything: metal, stone, air, thought. Instruments didn't overload. They simply stopped, as if data itself had paused to listen. People described feeling weightless, not physically, but inwardly, as if their awareness had expanded beyond their bodies, merging with something vast and familiar. There was no sound, only the memory of sound. When it was over, no one could say what had truly happened. Atlas was gone. It didn't vanish in the violent way things disappear. It dissolved, like mist in sunlight, leaving behind no debris, no trace, no measurable signature, only a slight increase in background coherence, a stillness that lingered in every measurement thereafter. For days, the world waited for something, a signal, another pulse, a hint of what came next. None arrived, and yet everything felt changed. Radio astronomers searching for the object's residue discovered that the space it once occupied was no longer empty. It shimmered faintly with structured vacuum energy. The first known instance of organized quantum noise. Where matter had once existed, there was now meaning. Across the scientific community, a single idea began to take hold. Perhaps 3I Atlas had never been a traveler at all. Perhaps it was an instrument, a tuning fork struck by creation itself to remind the universe of its own harmony. The sun remained calm, its magnetic field balanced, its solar wind soft, its cycles unusually stable. Earth followed suit, its magnetosphere glowing with quiet symmetry. And over time, the resonance faded into what humans began calling the background peace. It was still there, too faint for machines, but perceptible to something else, the still mind. When you sat in silence long enough, when you listened not with ears, but with being, you could sense it. The pulse that was never just out there, but in here. People began to speak of it differently, not as a signal, not as science, but as presence. The living awareness of the cosmos, felt through every breath, and one night, months later, a small observatory in Chile picked up a single faint echo from the same coordinates beyond the heliosphere. Not a pulse this time, but a tone, pure, continuous, lasting exactly 33 seconds. The tone carried no modulation, no pattern, only harmony, perfect and complete. When converted to sound, it resembled the human note of A, the pitch that orchestras on Earth have used for centuries to tune their instruments. It was as though the universe, having learned to sing again, had offered one final reminder: we are part of the music. The scientists who recorded it didn't issue a press release. They simply sat together, listening to that steady, unwavering note as it faded into silence. And when it was gone, the world went on, not knowing it had changed forever, not realizing that the stars above were no longer silent, but humming softly in tune with everything that listens. Somewhere, in every breath, the rhythm still lingers,